my name is John Alexis Guerra Gomez, and in this tutorial I'm going to explain how to create a D3 plus Crossfilter Brush and Linking application. The idea is that I'm going to be using the BAS 2017 mini challenge, and what we want is to be able to interact with the different bars and then get updates on the other elements, like for instance here on cover. And then moreover, we are going to create a D3 brush that we can move through the timeline so we can actually see the changes on the other elements. All of the solutions for these tutorials, you can find it here in this repository, D3 brush and linking example on my GitHub, where you can see all the steps that I'm going to be following. But in here, I'm going to be starting from scratch. And then here you can see in the releases like all the different steps. Now, so let's get to it. So I'm going to go into temp folder, and then let me create a new folder called brush example. And inside that, here is what I'm going to do. Let me start Sublime in there. And then the first thing is that if you guys have seen, I also created another tutorial where I show how to use the D3 reusable pattern created by my Bostock to create a bar chart, a time series, and all of that. So you can see that also in this repository, the D3 reusable chart example. And I'm going to be using two of those modules. So here is the first one, it's the bar chart. So I'm going to paste that in here in a new folder called JS, and inside there I'm going to create a new file that contains the bar chart.js. Of course, you can clone the repository and access it in a more decent way, but this should work for the moment. Okay, so same thing with the time series chart. I'm going to create another file in here called time series chart.js, and then we have those two charts. Okay, nice. So the other thing we are going to be needing is to start displaying those on the screen, and for that we are going to be needing some data. So we are going to be using the BAS Challenge 2017 data. This is a quite interesting challenge made every year by the InfoVis community, and we are going to be using this mini challenge number 1 to represent that. I actually have that data ready in another one of my repositories, and I'm going to be using only a slice of the data just to make sure that this thing loads quick enough. So I'm going to save that in another folder in here called data, and inside there I'm going to create a new file that I'm going to save as past 2017.csv. Okay, I think I made a mistake in here. I saved the file in the wrong folder, so let me move that on Finder. So this time series goes in here inside the JavaScript. So now we have this, the bar chart, the time series, and the data. Okay, so let me close this so it updates. Good, perfect. So now to start displaying those things, we actually need some layouts. So I'm going to use Bootstrap for that. So I guess you guys might be already used to it. Bootstrap, it's a nice CSS and JavaScript framework created that offers an interesting grid. So I'm not going to go into too much detail of that. So basically, I'm going to copy their CDN for the JavaScript, and I'm going to put all of that here inside an index.html file. So I'm going to use a typical template. So this is a D3 brush example or tutorial. And then let me put in here, same thing, brush tutorial. And then the idea is that we just need to include the Bootstrap. So I'm doing that here with these two things. If you guys keep on reading, they keep on explaining here what is the other requirements. We need to add these 3 meta to the headers. We already have one of those. So the UTF is already taken care of. And then this other one will help us get things fluent, especially the one with the initial skill one, with the viewport. Now here are some examples. I'm actually going to go here into the CSS part. And as you guys can see, basically the idea is that we just need to have a container. In this case, I'm going to use a container fluid. And inside there, the idea is that we just create a div row. And inside each row, we can create different divs depending on how much space we want them to use. So I'm going to use just one that uses 12 columns, that is on the smallest size. And in there, I'm going to put a timeline. And I'm going to create a div in there that has an ID called timeline. And then I'm going to create yet another one like this. In this case, whenever it's on a small screen, it's going to use 12 dots. But whenever it's on a medium screen or bigger, it's actually, I want it to use 4 columns. And then same things, I'm going to say these are my car types. And I'm going to create a div that says car types in here, or types. And I'm going to replicate the same thing, but for the gate names. So if you guys look at the gate names. So if you guys look at the data, basically in here you see that we have a timestamp, a car ID, a car type, and a gate name. Okay? So having this, let me run a simple HTTP server here, 8081, because I have the other one already busy. If we go there, we should see that we actually have those 3 things. Okay? Now, I'm using this D3 Reusable Charts module by Mike Bostock. So to use actually the data, he explains in here that the idea is that we create these charts in this way. You can see all of that in my other video. But then the idea is to use it, you just create something like this. You say, here is my time series chart, and then you load the data, and then you call it with something like that. So let's do just that to start calling that. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to be including that on another file. So I'm going to create here my main JavaScript file. And in order for this to work, I also have to load the 2 other ones that I created. So I have the bar chart.js and the time series chart.js. Okay, so I'm going to create now my main.js. I'm going to add some globals in here such that my linter doesn't complain about D3 or the time series chart or the var chart, because they don't exist in this file. And then I'm just going to start instantiating those things. So actually I think this should be globals maybe. Anyhow, so basically let's start by creating the timeline chart. So this is going to be a new, and if you guys see this file, this is the object that we can create. And then the trick in here is that you can define what is your X accessor. So for this one, I'm going to say use return the key, and or actually let me explain that later in a minute. I'm going to create a timeline chart and a bar chart for the cars types, and this is going to be a bar chart. And then finally I'm going to create another one, and in this case for the gates. Okay, now I need to load my data, so I'm going to do that with D3 CSV. And then on the data folder I created a file that I called bast 2017.csv, and then here is my callback. Typical callback. If I get any errors, then I'm just throwing those into the console, and then here I have my data. Okay, so the way we use these charts is that, and by the way, let me change these to spaces so Sublime stops complaining. So the idea is that the way to use this is that I can select my timeline, and then I assign my data to it. So this is the data that I'm going to be using in there. And then I can actually call the timeline chart. However, this will not work because this is giving it the full data. And I just want to use only the timeline part. And then moreover, as you guys see, I actually have data on actual minutes. And what I would like is to aggregate these by hour or something like that. So that's where cross filters came into play. So, by the way, let me actually, before that, let me change this. And then I'm going to add, let me see what was the ID that I gave to this. So I have card types and gate names in here. So this is going to be card types. This is going to be gates names. Good, perfect. And then the idea is that I just need here the data for the card types, here the data for the gate names, and then here the data for the timelines. So, and of course, this cars bar chart goes here, and then this gates bar chart goes here. So this will not work because I'm still not binning the data, and that's where Crossfilter comes in. So if you guys search for Crossfilter, it is a very interesting library. Oops. Let's search it somewhere else. It was created by Mike Bostock when he was working on Square. Actually, there's a public version that should be available on GitHub, but it didn't work. Anyhow, that is that it allows these nice interactions. So I'm going to use simple Crossfilter CDN to use this library, and then I'm going to explain how this works. So here we go. So I'm going to use the minified version, and then I'm going to load that here on my JavaScript. So I'm going to be needing that for Crossfilter, and of course I also need to load D3.js. So if we go to the D3.js side, we can always copy this line, and then we have that and that. And then the nice thing about Crossfilter is that it will allow us to create this. So I'm going to create a CS data, and then I'm going to do a cross filter of the data. Now, the interesting thing about cross filter is that I can actually create dimensions. So for instance, I can create a dimension of the time with this CS data, and let's put cross filter here so it stops complaining my linter. And then on this, I'm going to create a new dimension. In this dimension, I'm going to be accessing the d.timestamp. And this, it's coming from, oh, where is my data? Here, it's from this timestamp. And then as you guys can see in here, I have my data, but it's going to come in this moment in a string. So that one I actually don't like. So I have to parse that. So remember that here on the CSV function, we can actually pass a second parameter that is going to be another function that receives each row. And then the only thing I'm going to do in there is that I'm going to say for each timestamp, I'm going to do a time format of the timestamp. Basically what I'm doing in there is parsing the date, and I'm just returning this. And by doing this, that is going to be called for each one of the rows. Let me give it another tab in this, so this stops complaining. And then I just need this time format. And the time format, it's going to be just one of the D3 time parse. And then let's take a look at how the data looks like, and hopes that I remember what is the proper format. If I'm not mistaken, is capital Y, and then the month, and then the day, and then we need the hour, the minute, and the seconds. I think it is. Let's see if that works. And hopefully by the moment we reach this point, we are actually going to get the data parsed. So let's try that on the browser just to see how well are we going or how bad. I'm getting an error in there. CS data, date node, CS data, that's what the browser was complaining about. And perfect, so I'm getting an error in there. So let's see what do we have in there. So I'm going to go into the main.js. I'm going to put a breakpoint in here. And I want to check what data I'm getting. So let me see what I'm getting in position 0. So this is actually showing that this one has a good format. And let's just make sure that the time formatter is working properly. Format of this, and that should be a string. May 2nd, 1805. It seems it's working up to there. And I forgot a return here. So here. So I just need a return. So hopefully with this it will work. And let's see. Yes. So I'm still getting some errors in there, but it's because of the data. So let me continue explaining Crossfilter. So as I was saying, it is that I just created here a dimension. And this dimension is going to be very useful because later I will be able to say something like did time, and then I will be able to say filter something. And then I can say only show me dates that are between this and this. So I'm going to be using that later. But for the moment, let me create the other ones I want to create to do operations with. So I can do that with gates, and then with cars. And then if we actually look, I have one that is gate name, and then another attribute that it's called car type. Okay, so if you guys see here, we have the car type and the gate name. Okay, so now I have those dimensions, and then to get the actual data, I'm going to create also some other, and I like putting everything in one object. You can put it in different variables, but it's just the way I like it. So I'm going to create like time hours. And when doing that, what I'm going to say is that I'm going to use my dimension of time, and then I'm going to group all the data. But the way of doing that is by time hour. So what I'm doing is that I'm binning the data by the hours, then I'm counting how many of those exists in there. So the other ones are actually easier because in this case it's just the gates, and then in this case it's not going to be the dim time but the dim gates, and then these are going to be the actual cars, and then I'm going to do that from the dim cars. And as you see, I'm not passing any group because I just want to count how many items fall into each one of the gates and how many items fall into each one of the cars. And then I get some data, because what I can do in here is that I can say CS data, and then I can get the time hours, and I can get all the results for this. Okay. And then I can do the same thing in here, but instead of time hours, I can do it with, this is the cars. So I can do it with the cars, and then in this one I can do it CS data and with the gates, okay, and then get all the elements. So this is a convenient function that returns all of the elements that fall in that cross filter without filters. When I apply filters like these, all of these are going to get updated. I mean, actually not really true, but I'm going to explain that in a minute. You can also use another function called top, and then say only give me the top 10 elements, but I actually want the full data. And let's see how this looks. And most probably I will have some errors. Good. So now I'm getting something, but the charts are complaining and not really showing much data. And the reason for that is that I actually have to tell the charts we're going to be using for accessing the X and the Y position, the thing I tried to do before. So what I'm going to do in here is that I'm going to return the D key for each one of the element. And for the Y, I'm going to return D dot value. And the reason for that is that all that we had before, it is actually returning an array like that. So let me show you this in a minute. See if this works. Good. So we actually have some charts in there. And let's see if I'm maybe not selecting gate names. So this is going to be my gate names. And voila, we have 3 charts. So actually, if we stop, create a breakpoint, where should we do it? Let's do it in here. So the thing is that when I get in here, if you say the CS data, and then I say, for instance, the cars, and then I say, show me all, when I return that, that will return the count for each one of those. And then it just say, for car type 1, you have 3,600 elements. For car type 2, you have 1,900, and so on and so forth. So that's why we are using those accessors. Now, the other thing I'm going to be needing is to add some CSS in there, just so those things don't show on that ugly bar in there. So I actually have an example here on the reusable that uses that. So I'm just going to copy this for the bar chart. And I'm going to create a new folder in here called CSS. And inside there, I'm going to create a new CSS file with this. I'm going to call that main CSS. And then I just need to include it here on my HTML. And then I just say in CSS, main.css. And I need to do the same thing. This is the one for the bars. And actually, I can get the CSS for this from my postdocs example. So if we take a look here, maybe here it is. So I can actually just get these two in one. So these should be the ones, and then this is not called axis like that, it's x-axis. And let's see how it looks now. So when I refresh this, good. So now I have my charts with better colors. This is still bothering me because this is showing like it's very ugly. So one of the other things I'm going to do is that I'm going to say that these cars bar charts, since it doesn't need that much space, I'm going to leave it only with 300 pixels, and then I'm going to give a little bit more space for this one. We can actually make it update dynamically, but I think I'm not going to go into that detail in this example. And then I think I have an error here on my bar chart. You guys see I compute this inner width and height that are the ones that I'm using for updating the dimensions on the chart, and especially the scales you see here. So I need to do that every time the function gets called, and then good. So now I have that, but it's still those things look really ugly. So I'm going to show you something that you can do with this type of charts, is that after I create the gates, I can actually do a select to select my x-axis. And then inside this, I want to select each one of these sticks. So you see I have a class stick in here, and I want to change the text. So I'm going to do a select all, and I'm going to select all the tick, and then the text inside that. And hopefully, if I get this to work magically, so I want to do a transform on that, and apply a rotate of -45. And let's see how that goes. So if I actually do this, then we have that. Still showing like a little bit overloaded. So I'm going to change a little bit more of the CSS. I'm going to say that if I have overflow, I want that visible in all the SVGs. And then here in the x-axis of the, I think it's called gate names, I want the text actually to have a text anchor of end. And let's see how that goes. And then almost there. And then finally, I think this SVG is getting written by something else. So let's do it like that. Beautiful. Then the only thing it's maybe moving them a little bit to the left if we want to get picky. So I can actually do translate in there. So I want them, say, I think maybe 6 pixels to the left and maybe 1 up. Then if you see that, that looks a little bit better. All right. So now we have our charts. It actually has this nice effect that it does on cover. But then I want to change and start creating the brush and linking. So once we do that, so we need to change the bar charts in here. And then the idea is that, as you can see in here, I'm creating the bars. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to include a new event called mouse over. And then the idea in here is that I'm going to call on mouse over. More importantly, I'm also going to have another one that it's on mouse out, and also have another method that is going to be called on mouse out. So I'm going to save those as variables in here. So I'm going to have on mouse over, and this is going to have a default function that doesn't do anything, and I'm going to receive those as parameters. Since this is a reusable chart, the idea is that the user can actually change this. So I have those now, and then I just need an accessor here on my chart. As you can see, I'm actually returning the chart. That is the function that is creating the other one. You can see the other video to understand this a little bit better. But then it is that I'm going to do this on mouse over, and I'm going to create another one that also assigns the mouse out. Sorry. So this changed the mouse out. Good. Now the trick is that here on my main, when I create my bar charts, I'm actually going to do the following. I'm going to use a filter like this. But then the way I'm going to do it is that whenever I have my cars bar chart, I'm going to say that this is going to have a mouse over, and then I'm going to pass the function for that. So this is going to receive whatever item is selected. So what I'm going to say is that on the CS data, I'm going to filter that element, and then I'm going to update the charts. So that update function doesn't exist, but it's a function I'm just going to create. That is this function. Basically what it does is what we already had in here, that just calls the selections and updates on each one of those charts. And then for this to work the first time, I still need to call that function. And finally, the other thing I need to do is to create the on mouse out, because I don't want it to get fixed when I leave the mouse from there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a filter all function. And what that does is that it eliminates the filters on the cross filter. And then I'm going to call update again. Now I can do, oh, and by the way, I made a mistake in there. I actually do the filter on each one of the dimensions. So for instance, this is the one for the cars. So this one is going to be on dim cars. And same thing here. And then I can actually replicate that with the other chart. And here we go. So in this case, it's not going to be the cars bar chart, but it's going to be on the gates bar chart. And I'm going to use the dim gates and dim gates in here. So the nice thing of using reusable code is that you can actually do it, make it work for each one of them. So let's cross those fingers and then reload this. And then the nice thing is that when you update these things, you actually get the elements. But you see, it's actually making everything disappear. And there is a reason for that. So if we go and look into the sources, and then we see what we are actually getting in here, and then we call this again, you see that we are actually getting a key value pair. So we actually want to filter on d.key, not really on the full D, because D is just an object that it doesn't understand. So let's see if we can make this work. And then the idea is that when I move this, then I can see all the timelines for only the cars of type 2P and 1, 2. And then if I remove that, then I can actually see that it's updating the other one. Good. So now I have that. We also want that behavior for the first one. By the way, let me distribute a little bit better this. So I'm going to give a little bit more of space to this one. And then the other thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to give a wider space to the time series chart, at least 900 pixels. So when I do that, then I actually get this. So now I need to use the D3 brush. So if you guys check the documentation and search for it, then you will find this repository, D3 brush. It's a very nice module that Mike created that allows you to create either 2D brushes, or actually this example is going to be super useful. We want something like this. Then we can select an area and then move that and make it update. So it's actually quite nice because it's very easy to apply. The only thing that you need to do, and you get that all in the documentation of the D3 brush, is just to create a new group. And it is all explained in here. You just need to create a new group, call that a brush, and then use a function that actually call the D3 brush, and you see that working in here. So it's the second part in here. So you've seen the example. He's using in here a specific brush that is a brush X. So we actually need something very similar to this that we have in here. So we are going to add that into our time series. So I'm going to open our time series. Here is the function that actually does the drawing. Here is just updating the scales, adding an SVG, and here is the interesting thing. So very importantly, I need to add this at the end of all the other groups. So we have in there an area, a line, and then an axis. And I'm going to do that in the same object, in the G enter, and then I'm going to do it on class brush. But I'm going to, actually it might work in here. Good. So let me remove this. So I'm going to do this not on the brush end, but on just the brush. And then I'm going to create a function called brushed. Okay. Now, the actual area for this is going to be not really the width and height as it is in here, but I'm actually going to get them rather from the scales. So I'm going to say the range is going from 0 to the maximum element of the X scale. And then the Y scale, it's inverted. So in there, I'm going to do it with 0. If you guys are getting confused, basically what I'm saying in here is I want, by the way, do I have an error in there? Oh yes, 16 spaces, whatever. It's complaining about the indentation. Anyhow, so the idea is that when I do it like this, basically what it's saying is that my scale, I'm getting from a X scale, I'm getting the second element that in this case is going to be just this width, margin left, margin right. But on the Y scale, it's actually inverted, so it's basically this height minus margin top and left. So I don't really get it what it's getting those errors, so I'm going to ignore them for the purpose of this video, but I'm missing this function. So this is the brushed function, and I'm going to create that function just in here. And this is the function that it's going to be called every time we move that brush. And then if we see in here, here's what Mike had for that one. So I'm going to reuse that code and see what it does. Basically, we just need this first one, only transfer transition after input, ignore empty selections. And then finally, he was doing some trick in there just to use the time floor. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do just precise selections. And then I'm going to call this selected. So basically this D3 event selection contains the range of selections on the element. And basically what it's doing is calling map and map invert on that, but my scale is called X scale. Now I do have the selected in here, and I have to get that out to my main.js. So the only way I can do that, that I can think of at least right now, it's creating another callback that the user can actually assign. So I'm going to pass the selected to that. So of course this onBrush doesn't exist, so I'm going to create it right now. And same thing with it with the onHover. So this is going to be a function that right now it's not doing anything. And then I just need to add some accessors so the user can define that from the outside. So I'm going to, too many. So here, unbrushed, okay? So now if I go into main.js, then I can do exactly the same trick that I did with these guys. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use my timeline chart, and then I'm going to say unbrushed, and then I'm going to pass here my callback. Here are the selected, and then same trick. I just do CS data on the dim of time, and then I want to filter on those guys. And just after that, I just do an update, and that should be it. I see an error in there. This one. Let me see my code. So here, I now can actually create a brush, and there you go. You can actually see that one going. So that's what step 5 is in there. I hope you enjoy this. If you have any questions, please do let me know in the comments. And if not, I guess I will see you next time. Thank you very much.